So this is the key thing. We all have photoreceptors. Some are elegant structures, but essentially every chemical absorbs light of some kind. Right. Vibrational, particularly. That's why sunlight is 55% infrared. You know, so, and that's why our physiology has accommodated the use of that light, the most prolific light, by every molecule having a vibrational signature. Some materials, what are they? They're clear liquids. What light in the visible range does a clear liquid absorb? Anybody? Anybody can answer that question? Steve, what light does a clear substance absorb? Or a white substance? And the answer is none. Doesn't absorb any visible light if it's clear, because we don't see anything in it, white substance. So, you know, it will definitely absorb in the UV. Almost everything absorbs in the UV eventually, 250 nanometers, something like that. But that same clear liquid, that same white substance will definitely have absorption bands, unless it's an atom. But any molecule will absorb infrared. So every single molecule in your body is a chromophore for infrared and near infrared light. So that's the key thing. Some substances, these are the quotes from NASA, some substances when excited by light are elevated to a higher energy state and then relaxed down to the ground state. So we mentioned that, but I have another example in text, which I think is helpful for us. So once again, in the UV invisible, you promote an electron. If there's nothing there to grab that electron, it goes back down to the ground state. It might do that without any energy loss, or it might do a redshift to release a lower energy light and generate some heat. Okay, so how does sunlight and infrared light improve health? So we talked about PEMF. That is a magnetic field, and the Faraday effect. Faraday did that experiment where he put in high magnetic field and illuminated a light bulb. So even though it's a magnetic field, it has a perpendicular electric field, and it's inducing an electric current. But light is electromagnetic, so the magnetic field penetrates more deeply, less interference, less absorption. So you can get an electric field from PEMF very deep, but light also induces a magnetic field, so you can get it's much weaker than the energy produced by the light itself. That does work, promote an electron, create vibration, create rotation, but you can still create electrons with the magnetic component of light. So that's why I have a repeat of Faraday's law of induction here, even though we're talking about light, not PEMF. But light is electromagnetic, and PEMF is just intense magnetic. Once again, Pollack said that we have, how about silver for your eyes? Not sure about that. I wouldn't do it unless I saw good data on that. The iodine, okay. But anyway, what Pollack says is we have a background of 0.7 Gauss that we're being exposed to all the time. The beamer's 1 Gauss, the mat I got is 3 Gauss. But if we crank up the Gauss, then what we do is we're cranking up the electricity. And if we're cranking up the electricity, we're cranking up the electrons. And if we're cranking up the electrons, we're cranking up healing. So that's why, you know, the least expensive thing you do, and Mercola says this all the time, is go outside. So, and then how does light energy work? I think I'm going to grab this from NASA. I think it somewhere in there there might be a little bit of a gem, but I didn't find anything on any website that I thought really captured this. Maybe one thing in there, and I think the one thing is really important when I find it, or if I don't find it in my notes here, I'll regurgitate it. But each orbital, you know, energy is quantized, so it's not like there's just a continuum of energy. There is definite steps, and that's why we have different redox agents, because the reaction you have requires a certain energy, and then different redox substances have different energy levels to which, then we have to get above that energy level to drive something. If we don't, it's like the basketball, like me trying to dunk, and I jump up at the backboard, and I can hardly reach the backboard, and I certainly cannot dunk. So that means the reaction doesn't occur. You didn't get the 2 points, okay? So each orbital has a specific energy associated with it. For an electron to be boosted to an orbital with higher energy, it must overcome the difference in energy between the orbital it is in, which is called the ground state. Everything's neutral. Everything's just sort of in balance. And the orbital into which it's going. That means that it must absorb a photon, there you go, light, that contains precisely that amount of energy, or take exactly the amount of energy from another particle in a collision. I'm not so sure about that part, because this is more vibrational. Photochemical reactions, a chemical reaction initiated by the absorption of energy, and light is energy, and the light. The consequence of molecules absorbing light is the creation of transient excited state whose chemical and physical, this is the one. So you're creating a transient excited state whose physical and chemical properties differ greatly from the original molecule. So it's the same molecule, but you put an electron up to a higher energy state. So even though it looks like the same molecule and all that happened was light hit it, it becomes a very different substance, molecule, whatever, in terms of reactivity. And what that really means is it has substantially enhanced capability of donating or accepting an electron. Donating because this electron up above in the excited state is free to go. It's kind of it's a little bit unhinged, okay, because the nucleus is positively charged, the electron is negatively charged. And now that the electron is further away, there's less attractive force between that electron and the nucleus, so it's more available to go fly away. It's fly in the coop. And then, of course, it becomes an electron acceptor, because when that electron goes up, there's a void down below that causes the molecule to not fulfill the octet rule, which is the most stable form. So there's a void, a vacancy, and the vacancy is of an electron, so it's going to grab an electron from someplace else. Okay, but the main thing is electron donation. And that's why specific chromophores are able to direct that process. Okay, direct that process in the electron transport chain. The melatonin, the glutathione will direct that process, or take that electron and escort it to the electron transport chain to oxidize to reduce NAD plus back to NAD, so the cycle can continue, and all the other components of that electron transport channel. And so, where am I? This one doesn't, there we go. Not sure why I had that one in there, because we already had that, but so the PEMF is light. PEMF is the magnetic portion of light, but at much higher intensity. The dose makes the poison, the dose also makes the cure. So we can't forget that part of it. Many of us have preconceived, not you guys, never, but many of us have preconceived notions about how our body interacts with light. Most of us understand visible. Our eyes have photoreceptors. We also experience warmth in the skin. How many people realize this is due to infrared light, not some artifact of light we observe with our eyes? Hopefully many people understand that the skin has photoreceptors, and some of them interact with UV light to produce vitamin D. To count the number of photoreceptors in our body is impossible, because every molecule absorbs some light, UV, visible, infrared, microwave, whatever. So basically every molecule is a chromophore. So anytime light can touch upon you, it's doing some type of work, and the presumption is it's beneficial work. It's not benign, but it's not a strong force. That's why we have to get out there every day. Every day we're breaking down tissue. So every day we have to get some sunshine as one mode of healing to repair and rebuild that tissue by donating electrons. A photoreceptor does not have to have some elegant complex structure, essentially every chemical. That's what I just said. And then Alyssa has spelled that wrong, but you'll forgive me. But here's the newest piece for today that we're going to go over. New science explains that photoreceptors may be much more ubiquitous than naively thought. Infrared light is able to penetrate deep into our body. Do you think that it's doing this without reason? You know, it activates photoreceptors or specific molecules at the cellular level. Infrared radiation can penetrate bones and the crevasses in the brain and even reflect the light waves down deep into the caverns, such as the gray matter that may be exposed to near infrared light. There are studies showing that the symptoms of multiple sclerosis improve upon exposure to sunlight, sanatoriums. So I haven't done this yet, but I think people with mood disorders, neurodegenerative processes, you know, you can do photobiomodulation with specific bands of light. You know, the classic is 660, which is red, and 830, which is near infrared. But I think, you know, I'm doing my phototherapy whole body, and when I take my methylene blue, it absorbs at 605, and I'm shining the light somewhat tangentially to my eyes. But I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for people with mood disorders to irradiate that cranium for both the warmth, hyperthermia, and for the light penetration. Now, a recent study came out that showed that children who had high fevers at a young age, who told me about this, or did I read it? I'd like to find that reference, have much fewer infectious diseases or much fewer diseases later in life. And, you know, even in COVID, they and other types of infectious disease that drive a high fever, it tends to be a broad antibiotic process. So the sauna, excellent thing. The light is an excellent thing. So it's just not one mode of action. It's both the elevation and temperature. Pathogens don't like high temperature. I don't know if Dr. Harshfield's on today, but he made it very clear that the nasal cavity is constantly stuffed up. Why? Because it's cooler than the rest of the body, and pathogens don't like heat. So the nasal cavity is the right environment for the proliferation of organisms. Okay, so sunlight energy of the infrared type plays an extremely important role in the cellular energy production. Sunlight acts on our cellular energy plants, the mitochondria, which the intracellular organelles. So these complex structures produce ADP, our energy currency. However, like a motor vehicle, producing energy without the management of the process can lead to the biological equivalent of overheating that may slow or stop energy production. At the cellular level, this overheating is oxidative stress. Okay, the process is detrimental to cells and tissues. So oxidative stress basically means stealing electrons. Okay, immune cells are cells too, and they are overheated with oxidative stress. Your body loses some level of immune protection, leading to a variety of diseases. And so light isn't just helping our healthy cells that we think about that are being repaired, but it helps the helpers that repair the healthy cells. So really important. Let's see. Our energy is produced by the Krebs cycle. Inputs into that process are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Output NADH, ATP, and GTP. With any NADH, presumably, maybe David Sinclair wrote this, so I'm not really sure. But you know, the NADH gets a lot of press, but it's a part of the electron transport process. But these substances provide high energy electrons. That's why anything that steals electrons reduces your energy. That's why anything that promotes electrons, PEMF, sunlight, a reductive environment, so you're not capturing electrons and dissipating electrons broadly. Anti-inflammatory is, we always look at anti-inflammatory as healing. Now you know why. It's electron availability. I mentioned that, you know, I love me some cod liver oil because it's a sacrificial reducing agent. It easily becomes oxidized, so your tissue doesn't. Okay, so it gives the electron, its electron, to something that otherwise would be trying to take it from your own DNA, your own physiology. So that's what antioxidants about. NAD, so it's at the top of the chain, holds the electrons that are then donated and cascade down the electron transport chain. NAD is electron rich and is referred to as a reduced substance. To be useful, it gives up an electron and perform an important biological work, perpetuate the electron transport chain. That is why intracellular antioxidants are so vital. Many forward-thinking medical professionals understand that this is essential. Essentially, all disease is oxidation of cells and tissues. I got that from the Jonathan Otto Brave talk. I forget the doctor that talked about it, but there was one. It was right after Lee Merrick on Otto's Brave talk number 6, and you know, that's there are probably very few that appreciate that. So that's what it's all about. That's why we do antioxidants. Careful with antioxidants because, you know, there's specific and general, and within the mitochondria, it's a very specific process of antioxidation, whereas we don't want scavenging free radicals generally, or at least too high a concentration, because our antibodies and our white blood cells, neutrophils in particular, produce reactive oxygen species for a reason. And antibodies more specific, but neutrophils more general. And so in a way, the general immunity is more important. That's the first line of protection, then the antibodies. So we don't want to create an antioxidant physiology extracellularly that's too high. That's why the antioxidants I use are just vegetables. And last night I had a nice big stir fry, but I had a pint of ice cream instead. The hell of it. Do as I say, not as I do. But you didn't play 3 hours of hockey last night. So I'll have it for lunch.
Yeah.
So melatonin and glutathione make sure that the NADH and other components of the electron transport chain get the electron rather than giving it up to oxidized byproducts of cellular respiration. Anything that breaks the chain of electron transport forces your body to work on fewer cylinders. The final piece of this process is delivery of the electron to the right electron acceptor, also known as an oxidant, and that oxidant happens to be oxygen. So we're converting oxygen to carbon dioxide and water. So in water, the oxygen is in the -2 form, and in oxygen itself, it's neutral. So in order to get to water, we have to provide at least 2 electrons to the process, but actually much, much more, because oxygen is not one thing to get with it. It's more complex than just simply we bring in oxygen and we produce water. It's much more complicated than that. There's a lot of electrons being thrown around all kinds of places. I think it's a 16 electron process. I can't remember, but that's why when I was doing photoelectric chemistry, and we were trying to fix carbon dioxide to carbon, carbohydrate, basically, trying to mimic photosynthesis. You just can't pop an electron out of a semiconductor, 1 electron, and expect carbon dioxide to suddenly get reduced. You know, it doesn't happen, because it's, number one, you need the right stoichiometry, Andrew, if you're out there, but you also need the ability to pass multiple electrons at one point. And so like a semiconductor just throws 1 little electron at the PN junction. So it's not adequate to do complex work. That's why we have very elegant and sophisticated and complex biological structures that are able to orient the molecule and get it in a position to bring everything together to be able to do whatever it has to do, transfer multiple electrons, for example. And that's what makes our bodies just like extremely amazing compared to, say, a computer chip, you know. So glutathione is the important antioxidant that often is present in very high concentrations in cells, we hope. In mitochondria, melatonin upregulates the activity of the major antioxidant enzyme superoxide dismutase, leading to glutathione production. But there's another important enzyme before that, which I'll talk about in the chain in a second. So glutathione is recognized as the master antioxidant. Let's see, we think that's there. That term kind of says, it's there to just be a generalized antioxidant. No, it's very specific. I believe it's best referred to as a sensory antioxidant to protect the cellular energy production king. I don't know if I like that, but you know, that was the metaphor I came up with. I really call it a specific or targeted antioxidant. It's just doing one function within the mitochondria to make sure that that electron transport chain continues by, when one thing gives up an electron, bringing it back and bringing it back to the antioxidant or reduced state. And we're almost done, but I have some pictures. So here's how light enters the picture. Melatonin, a very powerful antioxidant, its partner cytochrome C oxidase affect this process. The electron transit should be effect, but I didn't use Grammarly on this one. I'm using that now, and it's helping me a lot. Electron transport chain and combines hydrogen in the form of protons and oxygen in water to get an oxygen into water. So protons and oxygen. So in neutral pH, there ain't a lot of protons around, 10 to the minus 7 protons. So, you know, something has to like increase the concentration of protons in your intracellular physiology in order to get this reaction to occur. It just doesn't happen. If you have 10 to the minus 7 moles, you know, compared to water, you don't have a lot of that reaction is going to go very slowly because you have a minuscule amount. And so like you take away a little, you know, you create a proton, you take one away, you barely produce another one. It's going to be a very slow process. So that's where physiology comes into, and enzymes come in to enhance this process. Most of the melatonin in our body is not produced in the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is below or above, so sunlight, not sure. Someone who knows, someone actually took anatomy and physiology can answer that question. Instead, it is produced in the mitochondria from the action of infrared light and does not fluctuate in concentration with the circadian rhythm. It, along with the glutathione produced from melatonin is there to keep us from rusting from the inside out. Importantly, supplemental melatonin, this is a guess. Dr. Carter kind of indicated differently, but this is from Roger Schwelt and then Zimmerman, who Schwelt quoted, who wrote the paper all about this process. And then I listened to Eric Berg's talk on this as he tried to interpret all this stuff. So where was I? Melatonin, it probably is counterproductive because it can stimulate sleep response without getting inside the cells to clean up the byproducts of metabolism. I'm not sure, just like we had that gentleman on talking about measuring, what was he measuring intracellularly? Was it NAD? And I asked him what the balance was between NAD and NAD plus, because that's really the important ratio. It's kind of like in lipids, it's the HDL-LDL ratio. So it's not just about NAD or NAD plus. The ratio is probably the most important, because if you have a ton of NAD type present, but most of it's the oxidized form, and you're not getting it into the reduced form, it's not helping this electron transport chain. It has to be in the reduced form to do its activity. That's why the sunlight and PEMF are healing. Okay, so importantly, supplemental melatonin. Okay, I already mentioned that. So now I don't know how I introduced this so quickly without talking about it. Let me just see if I did it. No, I didn't. But anyway, so what absorbs the light? Does melatonin absorb the light? Maybe. We know melatonin is a molecule, and therefore, if it's a molecule, it interacts with light, but it's probably acting on with the near infrared in terms of vibrational, but not from the point of having interacting with the light, absorbing light, and making electron available. That's where the cytochromes come in. So cytocellular chrome light absorber C oxidase is really the beginning of the electron transport chain, at least when it comes to light as a pathway. I'm not assuming that light's the only pathway. Otherwise, if we were in a submarine or whatever, you would shrivel away and die. So there are other pathways, but this is a pathway. But see, cytochrome C oxidase. So this is the visible region. It goes below this to around 400, but 500, 550. These are nanometers of light. So this is something that's highly colored. If you have a 605 nanometer, like methylene blue absorbs the exact same place as cytochrome C oxidase. Interestingly, maybe that's how it works. It works like cytochrome C oxidase. But so it absorbs the light, promotes an electron up, and that electron is available to reduce melatonin and glutathione. And then, so the reason why I have the 660 nanometer band is because a lot of LEDs put out at 660 and 830. But if you look at cytochrome C oxidase, those narrow bands of light from those specific ones are going to have no impact on this. And this is the beginning of the electron transport chain. So, okay, some impact. There's a little blip there. And then, what I did is I blew this up. So this is the 660 band on a whole entirely different scale. And then out here, you don't really see it. There's a little blip up. This is the 830 band. So that's where, so what the specific near infrared LEDs that just the specific ones, I don't have to be redundant, put out 660 and 830. That's why you want to get some visible light as well. This one here at 660 is considered visible, so it actually promotes an electron. Whereas the 830 is kind of, once again, defining visible versus near infrared. There's always going to be a blur between enough energy to promote an electron and not enough energy to promote an electron, but just great vibrational energy. But the scale is all based on human sensitivity to light. So there's a good chance that at 830, even though it's near infrared, it still promotes an electron. But this is a very weak band compared to this. This is a very strong band. So you're going to get a lot of these free elevated electrons that are not held to the atom so tightly so it can go someplace. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to show here. And then what I have is an overlay, complicated slide, but this blue is, so 400, the beginning of visible, and they're all showing a tailing off, but they actually absorb quite a bit in the UV. It's just the way they're measured. But the blue one is a broad spectrum LED lamp. And then these little dotted lines are the 660 and 830 of the narrow spectrum LED lamps, at least in the near the red and the near infrared. And then this green is a halogen lamp. And then the red is sunlight. Some of the sunlight may be less at different points than the halogen lamp. They're very similar, but that's because the sunlight has to go through the atmosphere, and certain things, particularly moisture, water, will reduce, particularly the near infrared, not so much the visible. So it could be that this blip here in the sunlight is due to water absorption. But the point is, now I tried to overlay the cytochrome C oxidase spectrum right in line with the spectrum of the halogen, the sunlight, and the broad spectrum LED. And you can see the broad spectrum LED actually does have a nice absorption band right over the strongest peak for the cytochrome C oxidase. And then if we go out here, we see that the near infrared or the broad spectrum LED tails off, but the specific band for, so, you know, what I'm saying is we evolved on the sunlight, but the 660 and 830 bands aren't too bad. You know, at least they do some work with this molecule. And this isn't the only molecule that's a cytochrome, but it's obviously an extraordinarily important one to make sure that energy is flowing in our Krebs cycle, the electrons are flowing in our Krebs cycle. So that's kind of the way this looks. So I'm not so negative on these narrow spectrum LEDs as I was initially before I pulled up these curves and created this little overlay. What else do we have? So this is sort of a summary of the action of melatonin, because everybody, you know, we take melatonin for COVID, you know, not really have to think about the mechanism. I didn't think about it until now, but the absence of light stimulates the pineal gland to produce localized melatonin for sleep and to cleanse the brain and the eyes during sleep. We need melatonin in those cells because they're highly energetic. Okay. Light hitting the pineal gland through the eye stimulates cortisol production to wake us up. That's why I tell people, you know, first thing in the morning, don't take your blood pressure and don't take your glucose, because everything's ramping up. Give a little time for things to calm down before you start making decisions on these measurements. You know, me, take your smartwatch and throw it away, but nah, I might be an outlier there. I don't. It's like, unless you're very scientific about watching it and seeing trends and saying, okay, I see the same trend every morning with my glucose, my heart rate, whatever. And then you can calm down about it. But if you compare it to when things have calmed down a little bit shortly after you wake up, or a half hour, an hour, and you just look at those two, they can give you a very different signal. Not always, but sometimes. I see it frequently. Infrared light from the sun penetrates deep into tissue and cells and stimulates cytochrome C oxidase to produce the reduced form of melatonin. And then melatonin is a specific intracellular antioxidant, but its presence stimulates the production of the intracellular antioxidant glutathione. This occurs during the daytime because this is when we are most active in producing the most energy with inevitable oxidative byproducts. These specific antioxidants make sure the electrons that do all the work in our body are not neutralized by oxidants. This is a summary. The specific antioxidant melatonin glutathione do not interfere with the oxidative action of our immune system and its action to control infections. That's extracellular in most instances. And once again, the reason why I mentioned that fancy term stoichiometry is because things have to get into the right configuration to do things, and so they may not interact and remove an electron from glutathione, and glutathione is definitely very specific at delivering an electron to NAD. So, and what do we have? Then I just, my final one before we enter in the final phase of light energy is that the dose makes the cure. So how sunlight and infrared light improve health. So lux is dose, it's the flux of light. Twilight, 1 lux, low street lighting, 5 lux, low sunset, 10 lux. But importantly too, I might mention this next time, is that when light comes from below, it doesn't hit the pineal gland in such a way to stimulate cortisol. How did that happen? We evolved around, you know, according to Harvard primatologist Richard Wortham, we've evolved around sunlight for at least 400,000 to 500,000 years. You know, they're all atheists at Harvard, so whatever the number is, it's not been 3 weeks. Okay, but when the light is low, and relatively dim, and probably more on the infrared side fire than full spectrum heading towards the blue, we are not stimulating the pineal gland. So you can have low light, and even being in front of the fire is calming, warming, and it doesn't wake you up. Okay, that's so people have historically had the campfires in the evening, and the light has always been below our horizontal line of sight. So room indoors with windows, 550 lux, dark overcast day, 100 lux, office lighting, we'll call it 500 lux, sunrise, sunset, 400 lux. Then we get to what we really need. Full daylight, 10,000 to 25,000 lux, huge leap, and then direct sunlight on the beach of Cancun or under Robert's infrared system that was so hot, we won't go into what happened, but he's okay, nothing happened to him. That's why we're trying to get 10,000 to 130,000 lux of light. That's when we really see the healing effect, just like with the PEMF. Dr. Pollack made it very clear. The one Gauss system is relatively useless. Some people have maybe a mild effect or a placebo effect, but he wants you to use the 2,000 lux. Hold on, my dog's having a nightmare. It's okay, Nick. Wake up. There you go. She's over there dreaming about catching a squirrel. So that's a little chart on that. Important, we've evolved and adapted to thrive in both the light and the dark. Tell our kids that. Turn off those backlit, heavily blue light systems. See, so the fire is kind of a warm light. The backlit is a cool light. Cool light is contrary to what we think in terms of cool and hot, but the cool light is actually a higher energy light. And so that's stimulating the pineal gland and keeping these kids awake, sleeping well. So we've adapted and evolved to thrive in both light and dark. How we interact with these two extremes is similarly important to health. Obviously, sleep being extremely important for giving your body a chance, particularly your eyes and your brain, to repair. But then the daylight to provide energy through the electron transport chain. So which one's more important? You tell me. And with that, all we have left is part 6 on energy medicine, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. Light energy medicine. And Dr. Pollack already covered the PEMF, so I'm going to talk about other things, some of which I haven't researched, like scalar energy. There's a device I learned about this weekend. I met with the executive director of Moms Across America, fascinating visit, and then the 2 pilots that testified before Ron Johnson's committee about how they were so impacted by the jab, and that was a really good meeting. Dr. Turner and I are going to be working with those folks. So let's see what we have for questions. Oh, too many questions. We'll just ignore them all. Never mind. Just kidding.
As a side note, before you bring up that,
please do.
Argentine 23 actually can be sprayed in the eyes. But silver in general can, use Silvadene, silver solutions in babies' eyes. So, but I would be cautious at just using any product, any colloidal silver, because some, they're not all created equal. Let's put it that way. But the Argentine 23 is an ultra high quality silver hydrosol.
Carl, thank you so much. You got the audio recording. I'm sending you my email, and that's going to save me a lot of time because I can just take the audio and toss the slides over it. So thank you very, very much for doing that. And I have no problem with anybody recording audio or whatever. We're putting it up anyway, so don't hesitate. let's see. So that's great. Let me just get to the top of the list here. But Michael, thanks for elucidating that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Elucidating that, yeah. So I'm gonna stick with the iodine now. I'm trying to just do one intervention, then I'll go up in March or April and get my eyes test. Can nasal irrigation with chlorine dioxide be considered as a potential alternative? I think so. You know, there's a lot of people that are nebulizing it. I'm not exactly sure what dose you'd make, but obviously, you know, when you take it internally in the gut, you're adding just like initially just 1 drop of the activator, either the citric acid or the hydrochloric acid, and 1 drop of the sodium chloride, and then diluting with water. There's got to be some formula out there for doing that. You know, we now have, as Robert documented, it works in oral, and there's a oral concoction, both A and B. I wouldn't nebulize that because they have some sort of dye in that or something to show that it's activating and some other things. So I would just go with the pure chlorine dioxide if I was doing that, but I don't see any reason for that. Just so you know, my initial data on chlorine dioxide, I don't have a huge cohort, but I have people that have been extremely zealous at using chlorine dioxide. And my initial data shows consistently that certain types of bacterial infections, the chlamydia pneumonia, or the chlamydial antibodies, and the Lyme band, so I don't know if it's Lyme or oral spirochetes, are still present. And we're talking about people who have been doing this religiously for 5 years, both the combined liquid, so making the chlorous acid or chlorine dioxide and drinking it, or taking in the sodium chloride directly. So I'm not, you know, it's reported in viral, and then they call it the miracle mineral solution or the universal antidote. Well, what I'm seeing is that it's not the universal antidote for intracellular bacterial infection at this point. So, you know, so all of them are limited, and why, right? Hopefully everybody knows why. Because as an oxidant, chlorine dioxide has a certain electromotive potential. Okay. And some of these organisms may have a higher potential on their membrane for destruction. So it's like trying to dunk that basketball. If you can only jump 9 feet, you're not going to score 2 points. If the oxidation potential of the chlorine dioxide is only so high, it will not oxidize certain membranes that require more energy. Okay, and that's the explanation. It's the only explanation. Okay, stoichiometry and getting high enough concentration to make a relevant contribution to the reduction may be part of it as well. But ultimately, the biggest factor that would create no effect, and I feel like I'm seeing no effect in these folks, is the fact that it just is not energetic enough to oxidize that, oxidize that substance. And most anti-infectives are, it's an oxidative pathway. That's my comment on that. Is molecular? Yes. Molecular hydrogen would be considered an antioxidant, just like fish oil. And once again, what's the potential of the hydrogen versus the fish oil versus something else? So none of these things are going to be miracles. If you want the ultimate, the ultimate antioxidant, you're going to use potassium. And no one's putting molecular, elemental potassium in their body, because it just dumps an electron like crazy. You put sodium, that you put, this happened at MIT. I didn't do it, but it was probably I wish I had. Someone put sodium in a toilet and just, or magnesium even weaker. Turns to magnesium 2+, it oxidizes, so it gives off electrons. Giving off electrons an antioxidant. So every chemical, you can look it up, electromotive potential. Every element, every molecule, every configuration, everything's redox have different potentials. So That's really what describes things. That's why you want to eat. What do we want to eat, folks? We want to eat food because it has such a potpourri of things, and everything in there is going to have different potentials and different ways it interacts with molecules. That's why it's always the best. And these things are, as Dr. Carter makes very clear, are supplemental. Supplemental. Do you need to take hydrogen? You know, I mean, maybe there are certain things that it can do that other things can't do, but it's all about that. That's why I talked about that last time. I mean, how many doctors know about electromotive potential, Dr. Carter?
None.
One. One. You do now. But, you know, we learned that in basic, you know, PChem in college.
Exactly.
Electromotive potential, but like, you were too busy. Like, I won't tell what you were too busy doing, but you were too busy getting, you know, trying to figure out how to get into medical school. I know your type. I saw you.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone doing research on supplying electrons to the human body continuously, like, you know, there are, Brian, I mean, I don't know specifically, but there are a number of direct electrode devices, the alternating current that Rosenfarb does, the Rife machine, I think pretty much does that. There are a number of electron, and, you know, just by creating a current, either AC or DC current, which will provide electrons.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, the easiest thing to use, you know, on a long-term basis at night is just using the PEMF mat.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
But I didn't answer your question. Anyone doing research on supplying electrons to the human body continuously, like a cathode protection system, protects buried underground metal. So I think sunlight, I think the things we're talking about are the most basic things. And, you know, eating food, you know, you do not have to take in an antioxidant in its antioxidant form. Your body can do work to convert that thing, just like in the glutathione. It's like it gets oxidized. It's useless. However, our body has a system to reduce it. So you don't always have to be perfect. That's why food is the ultimate thing. So, but, you know, anything, we have inflammation like crazy in our society. So anything that's antioxidant or anti-inflammatory, in moderation, considering we don't want to squelch the action of our antibodies. I mean, our neutrophils. So that's why that you have to go at it with caution. Will hydrogen have enough energy to suck the reactive oxygen species out from what a neutrophil produces? And if that's the case, you may not want to use it during infection. You may want to use it post-infection, just like the cytokine, like the virus and the cytokine storm and rapid inflammation. But, you know, these things these one-off type things may not have the kind of specificity built into it that you need to direct that energy to a specific place rather than doing a general thing which you may not want to do. So I offer caution in that area. That's why I wrote 3 blogs on be careful with general antioxidants. And that's now my views changed, broadened a little bit. I probably didn't understand this process as well, but that same thing holds, because that evil gentleman from the most famous in NAD from Harvard says, you know, be careful with antioxidants. So that's the guru on this space. Yet all he talks about is antioxidation, but, you know, targeted. Look, you need to do safe grounding. Absolutely, Judy. It's all about electron transfer. And, you know, grounding probably helps establish proper balance. You know, the quartz rod and the rabbit fur, you create that big charge on it. You know, you got to get rid of that. We had a gentleman creating vortex water this weekend, and this one lady that I would say was probably the least healthy of the group volunteered to put her finger in the water, and she got zapped. So, like, you can, you know, that's structured water, Steve. You know, it was quite amazing. I don't have the full understanding of what happened, because a lot of the things he said didn't resonate with me. But then when I saw her get zapped by the by just a bottle of water that had been, put into a vortex, spinning vortex. Is like, how the heck did that happen? I wish I'd volunteered so I could have felt it myself rather than just witness someone else do it.
Well, I think that the fact that my sed rate is very good is related to the fact that I ground when I'm indoors.
No doubt.
But living in a city, I mean, you're rural and you're outside, you're an athlete, you got all those things going on, but I don't.
One comment on Mercola. No one can share this with Mercola, but Mercola says that molecular hydrogen is a selective antioxidant. It's selective just because how big that electromotive force is. But molecular hydrogen doesn't have some specific, like an enzyme, these elegant structures that create a certain space and conformation for reactions to occur. I don't think hydrogen would have that. So he's right and wrong at the same time. Okay. In my humble opinion, I would never tell Joe that to his face because he's Joe Mercola. But are the glutathione patches the best way to administer? Michael, do you want to talk about
What's the question?
What's the best way to take glutathione and melatonin?
Well, again, as an oral form, the liposomal glutathione from Quicksilver, bar none, is the best oral form. And then the topical from Dr. Patel, also, an excellent choice. I mean, of course, according to Dr. Patel, his is the only one that gets intracellular. I don't believe that they probably tested Quicksilver's, but I would agree that some of the others, because Quicksilver really is the leader in liposomal technology, and theirs are far smaller than anyone else's out there on the market. So those are the two that I recommend to my patients: is the liposomal glutathione from Quicksilver, and then the topical by Oral Wellness, oral pharmaceuticals.
And Jeffrey is talking about cofactors for glutathione, and then you have to add boron to that, because the research on boron is not robust, but boron seems to play a very important role in moving electrolytes around the body.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, and typically, taking the N-acetylcysteine,
yep.
Is one of the main ways to do that, of course. So I always have my patients on NHC as well.
But my only point there is, if magnesium plays a role in making glutathione available to the cells,
right,
you also have to have boron to move magnesium around. They're all connected. The whole calcium balance thing is, the vitamin D, the vitamin K, the magnesium, and also the boron. How does methylene blue relate to light therapies? So methylene blue is a light therapy. It's called a photodynamic substance, Doris, because methylene blue has extremely strong absorption. So I mentioned this before. If I have something pink and then I have something deep red, they're both absorbing at the same wavelength, but the pink one, if they're at the same concentration, is very inefficient at absorbing the light. So even if you have a ton of light, if the chromophore is not very receptive to it, you won't get a lot of absorption. Methylene blue, and the molecule that Dr. Trump, Burke, Balmer, and myself developed, has what's called the highest extinction coefficient of anything ever developed. I've never seen one higher. There might be. An extinction coefficient is a measure of how efficient the molecule is at interacting and absorbing light. Not every molecule absorbs light the same way. It's based on the extinction coefficient or its ability. So the pink solution absorbs very little, whereas the dark red absorbs a lot. Methylene blue has a very high extinction coefficient. So at 605 nanometers, almost no photons escape. It absorbs them all and creates an excited state, which may relax the ground state, but may not. As we, if there's something there to physiologically to boom, pull it away, it happens. So hopefully that answers your question. But good one too. How much sunlight, oh, Martha, thank you, Jeffrey. Do you think that there's a problem to have too much vitamin D? I have sometimes had the 90s and felt pretty good about it. My range is 50 to 100. But see, just looking at vitamin D in a vacuum, you know, if you're at 100 and you're not taking magnesium supplements, you're not getting sunlight, you're not taking cod liver oils, you have vitamin K2, you don't have enough boron, then that's when you can start having problems. But you know, Dr. Hollick's the guru in this, and we've seen very little problems with vitamin D in the general population as high as 120, 130. So we're probably adequately sufficient on all these cofactors at that level. That's my guess. So let's see. I wish you would try to interview a homeopath because there's nothing but the energy of the substance. Yeah, I mean, I'm really weak on that, and that's worth considering. I do recommend a couple of homeopathics for some infections, particularly mycoplasma. I know nothing about them, but rather than treating with something aggressive, the homeopaths do no harm. So, but not skilled in the art. Let's see. Martha, as much as you can get, because we're supposed to be outside all the time, but if you're fair skinned, you know, you work your way up. But the main thing I want people to get based on that Lux chart is work your way up to bright sunshine in the middle of the day, 2 p.m., 1 p.m., whatever, depending on where you are in the time zone. But you know, that's why I'm doing with this halogen light every day. I am going to almost a red skin. Okay, and feeling great. I played hockey last night. Hockey's a really tough sport. And I can remember even when I played for the MIT team, you know, you do a shift and you'd be exhausted. I played like 3 times this year, and both times, you know, do a sprint up and down the ice, and I felt, you know, last night I went forever. So it's like, I'm doing this therapy consistently, and I'm doing my week PEMF, and I'm doing, you know, trying to do good nutrition, have some slips there and there, but and taking my iodine with selenium. Those are the only real things I've changed, and I've noticed a big improvement in health. Okay, Jenny, thank you. Yeah, Marcia, 20 minutes or until your skin is slightly pink, which means you're getting enough vitamin D. I agree with that. You know, and what I've also found is your body adjusts. Like a couple times I've been uncomfortable and said that's enough, but I stayed on it a little longer, and then without moving, so it's the same area being irradiated, and all of a sudden I didn't feel the discomfort from the heat. So it seems like your body senses that temperature and either increases circulation to carry away some of that heat, because I'm not going whole body, I'm doing pretty broad. But so yeah, so I don't want anybody getting burned, but try powering through sometimes. You may adapt to it. So with that, nah, I eat supplements. Of course you do, Steve. Hopefully, I'm sure they're food-based though. I trust you.
Well, some of them are.
Look, I'm sure you're doing better than I am.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah, right. I wish.
I'm a hit and run guy.
There's an MD in Kentucky named Jim Roach. You might know about him. He lives nearby you, I guess. Huh? And he recently said on a Q&A seminar that he takes 155 supplements a day, which I find over the top, but you know, whatever.
Over the top. I mean, just to be truthful, because what I'm doing with the Toxoplasma gondii, you know, I'm doing the methylene blue daily. Inga gave me so much on Saturday. She gave me a double dose for some reason. I didn't ask for it. But that evening, my toilet bowl was quite blue. I was shocked.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way,
Yeah.
do you use the wristwatch
I
activator?
don't. I just use my halogen bulb because I'm putting out heavy light at that level. So I don't bother using the wrist. I'm just under my lamps while I'm doing the methylene blue. So what I said is, do I panic about this blue, or I said, what the heck? I
No,
went under.
that's
I went
a
under.
good sign.
I went under my lamps.
That's a good sign if your urine is blue.
Yeah. So I went under the lamps again and said, I got this infusion. You know, she's jabbing me and putting the methylene blue in and running it through her UV irradiator and then the infrared, near infrared. And I said, well, if I still have some in circulation, why am I missing this opportunity? I went under my lamps for another half hour, which, you know, the light intensity from the halogen light in the methylene blue region is extremely intense. So yeah, I'm getting broad spectrum, but I'm getting the light that is particular to methylene blue as part of that mix.
That's
So,
660 nanometers. Is that what that, you know for sure that your halogen light is putting out 660?
oh, heavily, you know, that the whole curve, Steve, at 660, at 660, the halogen light is almost at its absolute.
Did you ever post a link for that particular light that you have?
More or less. But look at the halogen lamp at like, if this is 700, look at the halogen lamp at 660. It's spanking it at 660.
Yeah. Let's see. Is the green?
The green is the halogen.
The green is the
and then this
halogen. Yeah. Yeah.
dotted
yeah.
line is roughly 660.
Huh.
So I mean, I can't argue with the facts. I mean, it's a major player. And
I'm just wondering if instead of having a narrow light band might be more effective if you're just working on the methylene blue versus a wide spectrum, including the 660. I mean,
I'm not so sure. I
well,
think
I don't know. I'm just
yeah, I think
being
as
the
long
devil's
as you're
advocate.
activating the molecule, it's doing its stuff. So
Huh.
whether you have broad and some of the light doesn't have an effect on that one, or you have a narrow one that just affects that one, I don't really think in that case it makes a difference.
I'm not sure if there'd be any way to test that anyway.
Mm.
Hey, I was going to ask you, do you know about ASEA, ASEA, these redox molecule liquid that this company puts out, ASEA?
Once
Are you
again, write to them and tell them to send you the electromotive potential of the ASEA.
Oh, okay, I will.
And then you're gonna hear the silence will be deafening.
Yeah. Well,
And the other question to ask, Steve, is this antioxidant they're providing have some specific conformation to affect very specific reactions, or is it just broadly?
I think it's broadly.
If it's
Yeah.
just broadly, then the electromotive potential determines what it can and cannot act on. It's all
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
What I would compare ASEA to chlorine dioxide.
Well, I thought so too, but and they say that's not true. I'd like to see some hard data on that somewhere. If you have any,
So
Well, if you
papers.
taste it and smell it, it's very
I
similar.
do.
so what you
know,
have, Steve,
I agree.
what you have is pharmacokinetics. Can the reactive molecule get to where it needs to go? Do you have the right conformation for the reaction to work if it's necessary? And then the electromotive potential. That's going to determine whether it's worth it.
I'll say one thing. I don't get any negative reaction from the HOCl, but this ASEA is giving me massive hives, and so I'm probably going to have to stop it,
Interesting.
which will make my wallet a lot heavier from the green. That stuff is ridiculously expensive.
It
It's
is.
unreal.
It is. Yeah.
And I was on that Zoom thing. I posted some links about Friday Zoom meeting that they have every week. And you know, there's a bunch of docs on there on the one that's geared for the MDs and whatnot. And you know, they're all touting how the benefits of it, how you have to stay on it for life.
Yeah.
And they're all probably getting it at a massive discount because most of them have been on it for a good while. So
Well, no,
anyway,
well, you know, it's a multi-level company. So
yeah.
My question is Steve, did they do good labs before and good labs after? And if they
Yeah,
did,
they're kind of secretive about that. So I I haven't found that out yet.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
problem, but if you're taking it, we wanna, see, that's what I'm doing with Toxo and the methylene blue and people without Toxo and methylene blue is I have a dozen people now doing the treatment, and I have labs before, so I'll be able to see the labs after.
There's
Otherwise,
I-
not so
I don't
sure.
know if you all have heard of Luke Story or not. He has a podcast, lukestory.com. That's STOREY. And he, the latest one, number 477, he has this guy named Josh Daniels that has done some work with liposomal methylene blue, making it into a powder. I mean, this guy's way up there, and he's always talking about the cytochrome C, et cetera, et cetera. So lukestory.com. Check out that podcast, webcast, whatever. I found it fascinating.
Interesting.
So, just to let you guys know.
Good, good.
Well, thank you so much.
So we're doing Tuesday night. Then the question is, if anybody wants to throw it in the chat right now, starting in January, I'm probably going to move it to another evening. And if anybody has if I see a consensus here, otherwise I'm probably just going to move it to Wednesday based on schedules. But I want to attend, but I also want to attend my Tuesday activity session. So I'll leave the video up for another minute or so, but Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. And if you
Are you gonna change the time to 7?
no, 8 o'clock,
Okay,
because I'm dealing with West Coast too. I want them to have, like 5 o'clock there.
okay.
Yeah. Believe me, Doris, I'm happy to nod off earlier, but 8 o'clock, I think. That seemed to work. So with that being said, everybody, thank you very much, and we'll see you Tuesday, but then we're taking a holiday and start up again in the new year. So I wish you all Merry Christmas, and then I wish you then Merry Christmas tomorrow. Bye for now.
Bye.
Dr.
Dr.
Carter.
Carter, check your email.
Okay.
Thank you.